and welcome to Island Artcast, uncovering the creative industry with me, Olivia Savage, as your host. Here we talk about all things art, and each week I'll be joined by inspiring Max creatives to discuss creative careers, as well as burning topics in the art world today, to keep that creative mind of yours in action. Hello, welcome to another episode of Island Artcast. Sorry there's been a bit of a short break, but we are back with a brand new episode, and today I am joined by the organisation known as POCIOM. The two members today that I have with me are Elsa and Haafizah.
Yep, perfect.
Yep. And POCIOM stands for People of Colour Isle of Man. I met with POCIOM a couple months ago, and we talked about this episode and how we want to approach this in terms of directions in which to take a very broad topic, which is to raise awareness about minority cultures on the island. And I think we ended up chatting for just over an hour and felt like we barely scratched the surface. Yeah. So we're going to try and keep it a bit more focused today for our listeners and really hone in on why diverse representation matters. This is a really interesting topic for the Isle of Man in particular because we aren't as diverse as, say, England, for example. And so diverse representation is so important to put a spotlight on, as there can be a lack of it in both attitudes amongst society and job opportunities historically. And it's arguably still present today, which is why we're here. So today, my guests, Elsa and Haafizah, are going to explain to us who POCIOM are, why they're doing what they're doing, why it's important, and as well, what it's like to be working in this island, what is the Manx way, and how diverse representation is shown through Manx jobs. So, welcome to you both. Thank you for coming on today. So first, I'm going to ask, what is POCIOM and what do you do?
Do you want to take that, Elsa?
Okay, so POCIOM is basically an organisation, a collective that we kind of created about June last year. It's basically, its aim is to raise awareness about the diversity on the Isle of Man, create a space where people of colour feel supported, and also create kind of a place where people can go and find information or be directed towards information to find out more about the life of a person of colour in a place where they are evidently a minority. So basically I'd say it's down to like support, community and celebration more than anything.
And education.
And of course education. Education is key.
We do quite a lot of work in schools. So we go in and do assemblies and we talk to kids about not just differences in race, but also just differences in general and why we should celebrate those differences and why we should learn about other cultures. And it's okay, there's no your way's not right and someone else's way's not right. Yeah. Both ways are right and both ways are accepted. And we have been doing some work with the government as well, also with education and just like companies and again talking about how companies or how people can make a bit of a difference in terms of how they approach the topic of race or racism, whether or not there's something that they need to look at internally, whether or not their policies are kind of up to scratch, whether they are actual equal opportunity providers. So it's a lot. We've been doing a lot over the past year.
So it started off as just social media, on social media, but then we realised that like a lot of the work that we wanted to do was actually offline and in the community itself. And so we basically became like very quickly kind of like consultancy kind of.
Yeah.
Very
sounds like an accidental growth.
It
really.
kind of was.
It was just one of those things that I think we knew where we wanted to go and we knew what we wanted to do. We just didn't realise how much everyone else really wanted it as well. And we felt that once we kind of got set up and once we kind of got going, those conversations were being had quite often and people were saying, well, can we get you in to do this and can we get you in to do that and can we have a conversation or and we've had people that have said they feel a lot more supported. So people that have been through incidences of racism on the island have contacted us and said, well, this is what's happened. I don't know where to go next and I don't know what to do. And so we've been kind of that middle person for them of contacting the right authorities and making sure that whatever they wanted to do, however they wanted to take it forward, went to the right people.
And also like just a space where they know they're not alone. Because I think sometimes when you're the only person of your race or that looks like you, and you're in a space where no one else really understands like your culture, your background and your experience, it's nice to have a spot where you can be like, okay, like I belong.
Yeah.
So I have that community, and that's also been like a really important part of what we've done, is kind of like create this space where like people will message us and be like, I just need support, and we'll hop on a call with them and we'll chat to them, and
they just need to know that they're not alone. And
exactly.
I think it's something that we noticed quite quickly when we started, is that we had this group of people that were all roughly around the same age, give or take a few years, and we'd all been through very, very similar experiences, but all in isolation. We'd never actually spoken to each other about it. And I mean, I went to school with two of the people. They were in my year group, and you went to school with people, and we'd never actually talked. We never spoke about it, and we all thought that it was happening to just us, or we were just isolated, but it wasn't the case, and we're just trying to open it up so that now that kids are in school, if they do experience something, they know they have a place to go to. They know they have people that will understand and can maybe just explain what's going on a bit better.
Exactly, because often when you're a kid, you don't really know what's going on.
You just know that it's not good.
Exactly. You know it feels wrong, and you know that something's not quite right, but you don't have the words to articulate it. And I think like back to like when I was a teenager, I did not have the words to articulate. I just didn't know what to say, where to go, and having this community has really allowed me to kind of like open up and and kind of like articulate what I wasn't able to articulate. And then we kind of want to give that back to teenagers and kids and people of all ages as well.
And especially with the Isle of Man growing, and like you can see it's becoming more and more diverse every day. And just knowing that actually this is really important for the Isle of Man. Having a diverse population is really important. It can only help the Isle of Man become better and become its best version. And knowing that actually if someone moves here from a different country, or if they move here, you know, from England, but they're a different race, they're still feeling welcomed, and they're still feeling like they are part of the Isle of Man and part of the Manx culture. And I mean, me and Elsa grew up here, so I moved here when I was 8, and so I don't really know anything else apart from the Isle of Man. Like this is my home, but there were times where I felt like I couldn't really say I was Manx or my way was the Manx way, and I think that's what sparked a lot of this POC Culture Fest, which is just to celebrate all of the different cultures that we have on the Isle of Man. It's not to say one culture is better than another or anything like that. It's just to make you aware of what there is actually going on, like all of these amazing people and communities that we've got, and like food, like the amazing food, like food is one of those things that like binds everyone. But like something as simple as that, something as simple and as important as food, and just seeing all of these different communities and people and groups of people coming together as well. It's really important.
I think what you guys definitely, or what POCIOM opened my eyes to in particular over the last year, is how growing up, because as you say, it's becoming more and more diverse on the island, but growing up for me, it what I mean is, if you keep going back, it just becomes less and less diverse. And I think when you guys really started posting what you did on social media, I found that I was learning so much that I realised, how did I not know all of this stuff already? And I think because for so long we've grown up with such a non-diverse island, it just doesn't get talked about. Like I think it's just quite easy to for people to just feel like it's not happening because there's no one there to say this needs to be talked about. And so you guys coming in to play and saying this does, and then suddenly everyone's going, oh my gosh, like why isn't this already happening?
Exactly. And especially now that you can visit, because like when we were kids you couldn't really see the diversity as much, whereas now like it's in plain sight. Like there's a lot more diversity, and it's very evident when you walk down the street that there are people from various backgrounds, and with that does come a slight fear, I want to say, like from people. Like there's this need for us to talk about it, but there's this openness of a lot of Manx people. There's also kind of like this backlash because it's new and because it's more evident now, and because a lot of what we've read about other cultures, because we weren't exposed to other cultures, is very like fear mongering, really.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why, especially now,
Yeah.
that we are so needed, or like a community like us is needed, an organisation like us is needed, to like kind of squash the fear.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the backlash that happens is because of fear. It's not because of knowledge. It's not coming from
it's fear and then defence.
Exactly.
Immediately
Exactly.
because
Because we are from an island nation, there is this like this fear that if we bring too many people in,
we're going to lose something.
Lose the Manx heritage or whatever that means.
And that's what we kind of want to prove, is that we are living proof that you can be Manx, you can be French, you can be Nigerian, you can be South African, you can be Indian, you can be from like, you don't have to just be one thing. You can be many things. Many identities can work together and should be celebrated together, essentially. And I think that's another reason why we're doing like POC right now, or like Culture Fest right now, is because we need this moment where people can actually understand and celebrate these different cultures instead of just fear them, essentially.
So do you think that with what happened last year with COVID starting up and everything, and I feel like when we came out of lockdown, people were kind of looking for change. It was like a fresh start coming out in a lot of different ways.
God,
and like loads of new creatives we found, in particular at the Arts Council. And do you feel like for you guys that was a drive to start up and go, people are looking for change now? Now's the time to start speaking up.
Well, I think part of what happened was a year ago was George Floyd, and POC was kind of formed off the back of that. So what happened with George Floyd, which was absolutely horrific, but we saw that people had this mentality of like, it doesn't really affect us because it's in America or because it's far away. It doesn't really, why is the Isle of Man got to have anything to do with it? And when we started talking about the fact that, well, actually, you know, racism does happen over here, and I think the issue that we found pretty early on is that if it wasn't death, if racism didn't result in death, it wasn't bad.
Right.
And that's not true. Like, we're taught that racism is bad if it equals death. But it's not. It should never get to that point.
No.
It's bad. Like, racism, whatever happens, it's bad.
It's a slide and slope down. Like, once you allow one thing to slide, then people want to push the limits.
And say, And so people will
they become like desensitized to what that one thing is, because they'll go, that wasn't racist. Oh, I want to look a bit further. That was,
exactly.
And so what was happening is that people were outraged and appalled at what happened to George Floyd, and they were like, someone should never have been killed because of the colour of his skin and all of that. And we're like, yes, that's 100% true. But also, people shouldn't be like abused because of the colour of their skin. They shouldn't be left out of things. They shouldn't be passed up for opportunities. All of these things as well are still bad. Just because it hasn't resulted in this awful thing doesn't mean that the other things that have happened are not as bad. And I think it was about adjusting that yardstick of what's actually what counts as bad, and redefining what racism was and what it actually meant. Like what being racist meant. Like, if you said something to someone in a joke and they said, I don't like that, offends me, please don't say that. If they've said that to you, don't say it again. Don't be like, I know it's not offensive. Like, why did you think it was offensive? Like, just listen to them. Like,
and what are you to say whether it was? No, I don't think it was, therefore it wasn't.
So. And it's also the idea that, why do we want to settle for not being that bad? Like, why are we happy just being, oh, we're not that bad? Why do we want to be great? Why do we want to be just amazing? Why do we want to just be not that bad? Like, that's a bit that we kind of wanted to like tackle as well, or challenge, is this idea that we want to be better. Like, we want to be, as a society, we want to do the best that we can, and if we're not, we need to do something about it. We need to challenge our thoughts, our like ideals of what being a kind, good nation is, or a good society, like a society that's equal for all, a society that accepts everyone, like that, like the Isle of Man says that it is. And I believe in a lot of cases it is like that.
Like, it's welcoming.
It is welcoming, you know, exactly. It's a welcoming community.
It's like, what does welcoming mean? Like,
exactly.
what is the measure for it?
And who
decides that?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that brings me on to a really interesting point that I wanted to mention, is indirect racism.
Yeah.
So as you say, there is like the George Floyd situation, and that it's a very obvious representation of racism.
Yeah.
But I think what can be found, especially on a site like this where we say, you know, it doesn't get talked about enough, is that you find more indirect racism, particularly in the workplace. Can you tell me a bit about that and how you aim to raise awareness and educate about that?
Well, I think what we do is actually talk about it, about, you know, microaggressions in the workplace or in school, and talk about what they actually mean and give examples. And so some of the time where we get the most engagement is actually giving examples of stuff that has happened, and an activity that we do. Well, we've done it twice with the police, has been really interesting. So we had people write all of these incidences that have happened to them, racist incidences that have happened because of, like, by the police. And we had all of these scenarios laid out, and we laid them out, and we said, well, where do you think this has happened? Where do you think this has happened? Where do you think this has happened? And every single situation happened on the Isle of Man, but no one thought a single situation happened on the Isle of Man. They all thought the Isle of Man can't be doing that. It must have happened away. And I think when we do that activity, or when we had done that activity before, it really opened their eyes to, well, oh my gosh, this is actually happening here, and it's you know, these are things that we thought would never happen on the Isle of Man. And so we talk about these things, and we have the uncomfortable conversations. So when we go in and we do a workshop, or we do an assembly, or we do training, we say that whatever you're feeling, or whatever you want to say or talk about, ask it in the way that you want to ask it. It's a safe space. Don't be scared of offending anyone. If you do say something wrong, or if you do say something that's offensive, we will tell you. But that's part of the learning curve. And we're just creating these spaces where actually you can ask the questions, but be willing to listen to the answer. Like, yes, you can ask the question, but if you're asking it just to speak, then what's the point? If you're not actually willing to know the answer and take it on board, then why are you asking the question? So it's a bit of give and take as well.
That's the thing. We've had some really nice phone calls of people who have wanted to find out more about how to become anti-racist. And it was so interesting because, like, they came with all of these questions, and because they're open to listening to the answer, like, we left and we may not have agreed on everything, but at least they were open to listening. And then there was some learning that went ahead, and it just, like, it's looking at things from a different perspective. And that's essentially what we do. We don't yell down your throat. We just ask you, okay, so what do you think? Why is that your thought process? Why is that how you think about this certain situation? And can we offer a different perspective?
And also try and put you in someone else's shoes.
Exactly.
I think that it's not always easy to put yourself in someone else's shoes and change the situation around. So you think that you can't really understand where someone's coming from, but then when we create these situations or these scenarios where we say, well, what happens if it was this instead of racism? Would it be okay? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, the same thing applies to racism. I think when you talk about indirect racism, we refer to it as, like, microaggressions. And we talk about little, like, microaggressions that you say, or that can happen in the workplace or in school. In the school. So, for example, like, Elsa would have been, I'm sure someone would have just come up and touched your hair
all the time,
or
like, oh, it feels so wiry. I'm like, thank you,
and you're like, that's not okay. Like, don't, like, would you do it?
It's like, oh, it happened on this morning, didn't it? Like, not that long ago. Who was it? It was one of the presenters. Said, oh,
on this morning.
Said, like, oh, you look like a llama. Like, I just want to pet you, to a woman with an afro.
Oh my gosh.
And like, you hear that, and it sounds shocking because it's on national TV. But I'm like, the amount of times someone's asked to pet me.
And it's just like, that's not okay, because you would never do it to someone that didn't have Afro-Caribbean hair.
No.
Well, how many times have you had people come up and say, can I stroke your hair?
No,
or just do it?
No.
But,
and that's the thing. Like, if you wouldn't do it to one group of people, don't do it to the other group of people.
But it's also, like, I kind of see microaggressions as a bit like mosquito bites. Like, if you just get one, okay,
Yeah.
it's annoying, but you can brush it off. But when there's like a million of them, like it starts to get annoying, and that's when you see kids like lash out at school, for example, or you see people question their self-worth. That's when like the issue,
and it might seem like it's one small event at that moment,
but because it
building up,
and that's what people forget when people are like, oh, it's only a microaggression, it's not that bad.
Or it wasn't. It was just a joke. It wasn't that bad. It was like, well, imagine hearing that same joke every single day for your entire life. Like, it's gonna get annoying.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
So
and like little things like assuming. Like, I always get people assuming that I did not grow up on the Isle of Man, or assuming that I'm not going to be able to speak English. That is that is the biggest
all the time.
I always get people assuming that I don't speak English. My mum has this story that she says. So she was, I don't know where she was, but she had her headphones in and she was listening to something, and the person behind the counter said, "Oh, what are you listening to?" And she was like, "I'm listening to Bastille." And they were like, "Oh, sorry, I just expected it to be something a little bit more exotic." And my mum was like, "I just like Bastille." So, you know what I mean? And it's just strange. Like, I've had people say to me, "Oh, like, your English is really good," and I'm like, "Well, should be, because I only speak English." That's all I speak. Or what do you speak at home? Like, what do you speak at home? Or
do you speak Nigerian?
Yeah, do you speak
Nigerian's not a language, but the other day me and my dad were out, and someone literally went up to my dad and said, "Can I pray for you?"
Oh.
And like, but in a really kind of like, because they didn't think that he was Christian. It was a Christian group. They came up to him like, "Can we pray for you?" My dad was like,
gosh,
what? Like, why have you asked my dad but not my mum? Because my mum's the atheist. My dad's actually Christian. And it was just the weirdest thing, because like, he was the only person that they asked.
Yeah.
It was just very, very bizarre.
So like, when you guys go and when you go into like schools and the workplace and you do these workshops with people, I remember you mentioning to me that you've found quite a difference in response from children in schools versus adults. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I found that such an interesting concept.
So in schools, it was going into schools, kids are absolutely amazing. Like, they don't really care, and it's not about the fact that, I think people say this thing, and we've been saying it for years, it's this idea of you don't see colour, and I know that everyone's intention behind that is really, really good, and it comes from the best of places, but actually what it does is negate everything else that comes with the culture. So it's, you can see colour and you can see culture, but you appreciate it and you respect it. And I think that that's what we see in kids. They are so much more open to actually going, yeah, my friend looks different to me, but that doesn't matter. And it's not this, they don't shy away from it. They ask the questions, and through their innocence of asking the questions, actually get a lot further on than adults do. Like, they don't have any preconceived ideas, and the ideas that they do have, I mean, we do see it in some kids, you can tell that they've come from home because of the words they use, of the language that they use. You know that their 6-year-old brains have not thought of using that big word. Do you know what I mean? They've heard it somewhere, or their parents have said, can you ask this question, or can you find out this answer, and these ideas. And so you can see these kids come up and having like
the parents behind them like, can you ask this, because I'm
and so what we see with kids is actually they are so much more able to adapt to things changing. And I think especially kids that have been in school during COVID, with everything changing and just getting thrown into like a new world, they are so much more resilient, I think, and willing to adapt than adults are. I think adults have this idea that, well, this is what I've been doing and nothing bad has happened to me yet. So I'm going to keep doing it this way. And sometimes even have this idea that, I'll keep doing it this way, but I'll say I'm doing something else. Whereas
this
kids
idea
don't really
of saying
have
I'm not racist, therefore I'm not racist.
Because kids are just so curious, and also like, think about the world that kids have grown up in compared to like generations before them. Like, seeing like people of different races on TV is completely normal. Seeing people of different sexualities is completely normal, of different genders. It's so much more normal now than it was. So like it's not as much of a shock to the system. Whereas like for adults, it's a bit more of like a brain rewiring. And like some want to and some don't.
Some definitely don't,
Yeah. And like some think they're progressive but still
hold these
ideas that are, and it's difficult to acknowledge that we all have like these biases, we all have these thoughts that pop into our heads, and like it's difficult for us to then think, okay, no, that thought is actually wrong because we've had it's been programmed into us. Whereas like I always say like it's not your first thought that matters, it's your second, third and fourth,
right?
Because like the first thought is the one that's been like wired into our brains through like our upbringing and through like media, through like our surroundings. But then if we're able to catch that thought and be like, hang on a second,
why am I thinking that?
Why am I thinking that? Is that okay? Do I need to act on it? Be able to catch that thought and then go from there. That's
better.
And that like when you're a kid it's easier to rewire things, whereas like when you're an adult it's a lot harder, because like we also say it's kind of like a braid or like a plait. Like if you do a plait and there's a kink right at the top, how willing are you to unbraid the whole thing? To kind of rewire that.
And it's like this idea of like your first reaction, although it's wrong, that doesn't make you a bad person.
Exactly.
It's not about being
exactly.
As long as you're willing to accept that is wrong and take the, as you say, second, third and fourth.
Exactly.
Because I think everyone will have like innate reactions to things or things that they're just so used to thinking.
Absolutely.
But it's not saying that thought out. It's not like if a thought pops into your head, don't just say it out, like catch it.
It's also challenging that thought. Like there were so many
where
thoughts
that
that go through our day and I'm like, hang on, why is that thought coming to my mind? Like I don't believe that, but that's the first thought. There's so many times out on myself, but but the thing is, you've got to challenge these thoughts as they come. And realize that you're not that first thought. And like just because you've had one offensive thought, if you're able to catch it and then challenge it, it can be handled.
It's a start, at least.
It's a start, exactly.
So in terms of like making steps towards these changes, particularly in the workplace, and this idea of diverse representation, because we see a lot of this across of vacancies going up that actively seek someone of an Asian ethnicity or black ethnicity and this and that, but it's not as common here. And I wanted to get your guys' opinion on, is that some people think that in itself can be racist, or that's a misconception, it's actually a good thing? And I wanted to get your guys' opinion on that.
I think that's a tricky one. I think it depends on the company and on the role. So what we don't want to do is have this thing where just say there are people like applying for a job and someone that is a black woman gets the job. What you don't want then is for people to say that she got the job because she was a woman and because she was black. Because it negates all of her hard work and all of her experience and her education and her actual competency to be able to do it. And it's kind of looked at as this like diversity hire, and that's not what we want. It's about having people in, not just in the workplace, but as well at different levels in the workplace. So how many of like your higher ups are female, how many of them are people of different ethnicities or people of different cultures, and how does that actually help your company? Because if you have people that are all the same, you're always going to stay in the same circles. And it's never going to change, and it's never kind of going to get anywhere. And so it needs to actually be throughout the companies. It needs to be throughout the companies, and it needs to be done in a way that actually the policies don't allow for this to happen. Essentially, like one of the examples that we had was people applying for jobs with different names. And so exactly the same experience. So it was the same person, essentially. They just changed the name on their CV. And with non-white sounding names, didn't get called back for interviews.
Right.
But with white sounding names, did get called back for interviews.
Wow.
And that is, you can immediately tell that's not based on skill. That's not based on experience. That's not based on anything besides the person's name.
Yeah.
And so how is that fair? How is, you know, should we be having CVs where actually no names go out?
Yeah.
No pictures go out. No, like, is it relevant to the job? Is your name relevant to the job? Is your picture relevant to the job? Is your age relevant to the job? Do you know what I mean?
And also, where you got the education. I question whether that's relative to the job. Like, if you have those skills, you have those skills. Like, it doesn't matter where you got those skills, you've got those skills.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
like, if you have a university degree, is it not just a university degree? Like, is it better from different ones? Does it mean you're going to be better at your job because you have it from somewhere else?
Yeah.
For things that, you know, obviously, if you're interviewing someone to be like a doctor, they need to have a medical degree. And like,
well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
They need to have a medical degree and they need to have that medical knowledge. But where they got that from, does that matter as much?
Yeah.
That's my question.
If at the end of the day that sentence is the same that says you've got the degree, why does the above?
Why does everything above?
That's also something that we see a lot. Is that like if we have so many
incredible people that are so educated on the Isle of Man,
and who can't get a job,
because they have got their education from a different country.
Wow.
And so like if you have like a doctor's degree from somewhere that's not the UK or America or Europe, sometimes even America, you have to do other tests. You have to do other things. If you've got for example, pharmacy, again, you have to do other tests. It doesn't count, but medication doesn't change across the world. Do you know what I mean? Like, so why you still have to learn the same things. But we know people that are super educated and have like amazing careers in the country that they are originally from, but have decided to move here and make the Isle of Man their home for whatever reason that is, but can't get jobs because they either need their qualifications they can't get, or they need something, they need to reset 3 years of education or 4 or 5 years of education.
You can't afford to do at the end of the day. You can't afford to just casually sit, like, just pass up on 3 years of life. Just to get a qualification that you already have. It makes no sense. Especially when we need people at the moment.
So I think it's about kind of tackling diversity in the workplace is about ensuring that it's fair and that people have the opportunities. And so like something that I'm quite, for example, the place that I work at, on Fridays, so for Muslims, Fridays is a really important day. We have a prayer in the middle of the day, which is called, it's called the Friday prayer, but it's really important. We go to the mosque, and it takes a bit longer than usual, but actually having workplaces that actually allow that extra space of time is actually really helpful. So the place that I work, you know, on Fridays, if you're going for Friday prayer, it doesn't matter how long you take, because what often happens is employees that are Muslim go, oh well, I'll just do it on my lunch break, and then so they don't eat and they don't take a lunch break and they don't stop, and they kind of just squash it, and then that then impacts their life and their work and everything else behind it. So implementing something like that, like, okay, on Fridays you can take a longer lunch break, and it doesn't have to be just for Muslims, it can be for everyone. Like, just make up the time whenever, but like work, I don't know, half an hour extra on a Thursday evening or something like that. Just make up the time. But if that was available to everyone, that's a way of making it fair. So it's not just about being available to a group of people. It's about actually making it fair for everyone.
Well, it's thinking like if someone turned around to you in the workplace and you did shifts and you said, well, I can't work Sundays because I have Sunday church. And that would be something that you'd expect the workplace to say, yes, that's fine. It's just giving that to all. You know?
Exactly. So if you've got religious commitments, that's fine. If you've got
it's accepted.
If you've got a cultural commitment, that's fine. We understand that and we accommodate it, and we want to learn about it. And something that we went to was think it was KPMG, and they did,
they did
Africa Day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was incredible. So that was really, really amazing. So they've got a really diverse workplace. And what they did was actually getting all of their employees from like different countries to do like a little presentation about like top 3 facts about their country, things that they really enjoy, what it's famous for, and then like loads of food, and it was open for everyone, and we just got to like discuss loads of things, and that was so good because it was something that was like, okay, yes, it's about this one day, but actually it was open to everyone, and people were saying like they were having conversations with people that they'd never really had conversations with before, or like they were talking about how they made food, or how or like the facts about their country and stuff, and it was so nice to see it opening,
because it sparks up conversation, because like it's nice to, it's again goes back to like Culture Fest, is like the reason we have it is so these conversations can be had. So it's not just oh, racism, we can't talk about race, like these countries like they're just so poor, like it's squashing these ideas that we have and this fear about talking about people's backgrounds, because chances are people actually want to talk about their backgrounds. They just don't want you to tell them that it's a war-torn country and it's dangerous. We want you to actually just listen to us. Like, actually no, this country's amazing, like it has this and this. Yes, this has happened.
While I was growing up, this also happened.
But also, like it's not just a single story. There's so many different stories to every single country and every single culture. And like, if you give someone the opportunity to speak about their culture and to speak about where they're from, like you'll see that like every culture should be celebrated, and there's beauty and like wealth in every place, every culture, every background.
Well, thank you both so much for coming on today and
Thanks for
joining me.
having us.
No problem at all. Is there any last minute things that you want to mention before we go today? Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're done.